Hello everyone, it's Alex from Bad Decks Play Badly, and this is the latest deck I've come up with. If you have been wondering where I've been, I have been around, I just haven't really been playing much Magic at the moment. I've kind of got back into Modern Warfare, I've been playing Remastered on Xbox One a lot, and after 10 years I've decided to get back into Warhammer, so I've been doing a lot of painting, which I am terrible at. So yeah, I haven't really had just much time to do Magic. Well, I've had the time, I just have chose to spend my time in a different manner, I guess. But I do want to scratch that itch because I haven't played Magic in a while. I have actually had a few attempts at building decks, but they've been so bad I just didn't even want to show them off. But this one, I think, you know, I played a version of this. I actually made some last minute alterations a second ago, but it does get wins, which is cool. And yeah, hopefully it'll be alright. So if you like the deck, please like, please subscribe. It's always appreciated, and I'll try to make these videos a bit more often again. I mean, I think it's been about 6 weeks since I've made one, so we'll see how it goes. So this deck is Izzet Ascension. If you don't know what Pyromancer Ascension is, I will tell you right now. It's basically built around the deck Pyromancer Ascension. There's a lot of Jeskai Ascension decks, well, there used to be floating around, but because of limited, funds for because I'm using budget mana, I thought just splitting to two would probably work out a bit better. So we haven't got any Path to Exiles or anything, but we should be fine. So, well, I'll explain what this does. The Pyromancer Ascension, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that has the same name as a card in your graveyard, you may put a quest counter on Pyromancer Ascension. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell while Pyromancer Ascension has two or more quest counters on it, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So essentially we want to get Pyromancer's Ascension down on turn 2 and just play as many cheap instants and sorceries just so we can get two counters on it, and then from there the sheer value alone is usually enough to win the game. The hard part is surviving until we can get to that point, really. So obviously in a deck like this we need a lot of instants and sorceries, and most of it will be cantrips, and I'll get to that now. So we've got 4 copies of Opt. Everyone knows what Opt does. Scry 1 and draw a card, instant speed. Very good. We'll have 4 copies of pretty much every card in this deck, just because we want to maximise having one in the graveyard and then being able to cast another one. We've got 4 copies of Serum Visions, another classic, just like Opt, but draw a card and scry 2 afterwards, which is always very good. We've got 4 copies of Fort Scour. Target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard and then draw a card. This is actually really good because we get to draw a card, but we also get to fill our graveyard, which allows more options to put on counters for Pyromancer Ascension. So just very good in this deck. And just for one more filtering, I'll do 4 copies of Faithless Looting. It is a red deck. Faithless Looting is just an amazing card. And especially if we want to draw cards and then put stuff in our graveyard, it's just great. Draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and it has flashback for free, which is awesome. Cool. And we're going to have to obviously be able to survive and be able to burn our opponents out. We are playing red after all, so the main plan will be kind of burning our opponents out and copying burn spells. So for this, I've got 4 copies of Burst Lightning. This is it's just a cool card. It's not as good as Lightning Bolt, but in a deck like this, it's a very good substitute. So first off, we can just pay 1, and it's 2 damage to any target, which is fine. It's just a shock. If it was kicked, it deals 4 damage to that permanent or player instead, which is cool. So for 5 mana, a little bit later on, we can manage to do 4 to their face. The good thing is about Pyromancer Ascension is, I have checked the rules, if you pay 5 for Burst Lightning, you can then copy the Burst Lightning and deal 4 damage again. So that's essentially 8 damage to the dome with 1 Burst Lightning and Pyromancer Ascension online, which is it's pretty good. And then to round it off, we've got 4 copies of Lightning Bolt, 3 damage to any target. Everyone knows what Lightning Bolt does, it's great. But like with Burst Lightning, with a Pyromancer's Ascension down, that's 6 damage to the dome. Very, very, very good. Well, that's all the 1-drops. We've got 4 copies of Remand. I know this isn't quite budget, but I do have 4 copies of Remand, and it's just a good card, and I do apologise. If you don't have Remand, I'm sure Mana Leak will be just as good, or maybe some more cantrips, or just more burn, maybe some sweepers, something like that. But I do have Remand, so I'm playing 4 copies of Remand. It counters target spell, it returns it to their hand, and we get to draw a card. Very cool card. So we've got a lot of instants and sorceries, so we might as well have some creatures to kind of be our backup sort of finishes. So I've got 4 copies of Finger in the Ice. If you don't know what it does, it's just a 0/4 defender. However, when you cast instant or sorcery spell, it comes in the battlefield with 4 ice counters on it. If you play an instant or sorcery spell, it removes an ice counter. Once you've played 4 and removed all the counters, you get it flipped to Awoken Horror, which is a 7/8, but when it flips, all non-horror creatures are returned to their owner's hand, which is kind of great. It's a bit like a board wipe, one-sided board wipe, which is pretty awesome. I've also got 2 copies of Bedlam Reveler. This is amazing in this deck. Only 2 copies is really needed. It's a 3/4 with prowess, but it costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Also, when it comes into play, when it enters the battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. So it's just more ways to just churn through our decks, get stuff in the graveyard. Just a great card, really. And to round it all off, one of my favourite cards, if the Budget Snapcaster. It's actually better in this deck than Snapcaster because it is an instant, which is kind of cool, and it can get stuff in our graveyard with Survey 2. It's just better than Snapcaster in this deck. Essentially, you choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. It's basically a Snapcaster mage, but in instant form, and so pretty sweet. And we'll get to the lands. So it is budget lands as usual, and there's only 18 of them. We have so many cantrips. 18 is fine. I've got 1, 2, 3, so 5 islands, 4 mountains, 4 Shivan Reefs. Shock ourselves, but it's fine. It's budget. 4 Sulphur Falls, which is cool. It enters battlefield tapped unless we control an island or a mountain, but we should always have that. And 1 copy of Cascade Bluffs. It's a really cool budget land. I really like these lands. But the problem is, if you get too many, if you get, like, for example, if your opening hand has 2 in them and you've got no other land, you're on colourless for a long time unless you find another land. So I always find that just the 1 copy, maybe 2, is about as far as you want to push it. But other than that, it's very good. Comes in untapped, either way, for colourless mana, which is pretty sweet. But yeah, that's the main deck. The whole point is to kind of deal with early game threats, maybe restock with a Bedlam Reveler, get a Pyromancer Ascension on a go, and just kind of burn our opponent out, and we'll see how it goes. I'm particularly bad at playing decks like this, so you may have to excuse, some of my plays in the games, but I am learning like we all are. Okay, let's do the sideboard. Right, so I've got 1 copy of Dispel. Self-explanatory, just going up against a control deck. It's just nice to have an extra Dispel. Got an Echoing Truth for Planeswalkers, maybe tokens. It's good catch-all Echoing Truth. Got 2 copies of a Braid for artifacts, or if they've just got loads of creatures and we just need more removal, which is pretty sweet. Got 2 copies of Pyroclasm. We kind of struggle with anything that goes wide because we've got a lot of 1-for-1 removal. So Pyroclasm is quite good. If for 2 mana, deals 2 damage to each creature. Can't do much more than that. And that's 2 copies of that. We do have a lot of instants and sorcery, so it's great to, if we don't play many creatures, our opponent takes out their creature removal. So in game 2 we can bung some young Pyromancers in and we can just flood the board with elementals. It's just another good win con, and it will come up every now and again, I'm sure. I've got 2 copies of Molten Rain. This is just my answer to Tron and other stuff like that. It's also good for going against any like green ramp decks. Because they use a lot of enchantments to ramp. So it's good. It's pretty good. I wish I could have more room for another 2 copies, but it's been a really tight sideboard. And that's kind of it really. And last but not least, I've recently purchased these. These are dirt cheap. It was like 0.2 ticks or whatever for 4 copies. It's just I saw it online earlier, and I thought actually that's a really good substitute for this deck. 'Cause it isn't, because usually I use like Relic of Progenitus. But Ravenous Trap is just strictly better in this deck. If an opponent had 3 or more cards put in their graveyard from anywhere this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So this is great. It's instant, so it turns on Pyromancer Ascension, and it doesn't cost us anything to play it, which is pretty sweet. We can actually surprise a lot of people with this, and we will just hopefully never ever have to worry about the 2 black in the mana cost, because they will hopefully, if we're playing that sort of deck, they will be putting lots of stuff in their graveyard. But yeah, that's kind of the deck. I don't see anyone really playing Pyromancer's Ascension anymore. I think it was like a bigger card a few years ago, but I've never really played with it, and I really fancied having a go, and I think this is a pretty good shell for it. I did a couple of practice games yesterday with a slightly different version. Instead of having Faithless Looting, I had Sleight of Hands, but I thought Faithless Looting is probably just better. And I also had, instead of Burst Lightning, I had just, is it Lightning Slash? Flames? I can't remember. Basically, it's just a Lightning Bolt that costs 2. Was it Lightning Spear, maybe? I can't remember. But after doing a bit of research online, Burst Lightning just seemed like a strictly better version. It can only do 2, but it costs 1 less. And then when you do kick it, it just deals more in the long run. So that's kind of it. I'm not sure how cheap this deck is. I haven't actually run it through any sites to see how cheap it is, but there are plenty of budget alternatives. I mean, this could be upgraded more, but if you really wanted to go cheaper, I'd definitely recommend getting rid of the Romans. Yeah, because they're very expensive. Actually, to be honest, I don't know how much most of this stuff. Fingerling Ice is quite expensive now, but there's plenty of alternatives for that. Young Pyromancers instead. You know, it's quite a fun deck to build because there's just so many options. There's so many instants and sorceries. It's just cool. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully it will go okay for my return. And I'll see you guys for the games. Remember, like, subscribe, comment. All of it is very much appreciated. Alright. Bye.